Bharath Institute of Higher Education and Research, Chennai. Admissions open for BTech, BSc Agri, BPharm, Nursing, Paramedical and Arts and Science courses.
Hello, Tisca Chopra. Pleasure to have you on Galatta Plus.
Such a pleasure. I've been such a huge fan of your interviews and everything that you do. So lovely and so informative.
Thank you. And same here. I've been such a fan of yours. And I'm going to tell you the film of yours that I like the most, Kissa. I could not shake that film off after watching it. Of course, I think you managed this this very strange feat of almost stealing an Irfan film. No, and I'll tell you why. Because that character was the one purely feminine character in that entire movie of this Irfan's masculine patriarchal thing, and then this daughter with the confusion, and yours was the one, like, she was the foundation, like she was kind of the one person who was sorted, and she kind of knew what she was doing, and I really loved what you did with that character.
Thank you so much. I would love to take credit, but credit where credit is due. Anup, our director, is a master.
Yeah.
And he almost entirely transformed the way that I perform, and my films after Kissa have been completely different because one was ingrained in the more sort of whatever one could. I'm not a trained actor. I came very arbitrarily into films and without any kind of training. I'd done some theatre, but I looked like a Bollywood heroine. But after working with Anup, there was a certain method to the sort of anarchy that was around in my head, and there was a certain spiritual quality that he brought to my performances, and it was wonderful to be able to lean on him. And of course, we always pull his leg. We were really good friends. We always pull his leg because he's got the most unbelievably obscure way of directing. Like, he'll tell you, wind in trees. And I was one day like, stop this now. I really don't know what to make of it. What do you want me to do? What do you mean wind in trees? But then after a while, we got used to each other, and he would laugh, I would laugh, and then, we sort of found a rhythm. And so he's been a very big force in transforming me as a performer.
What was your approach to acting earlier versus after Kissa?
So one is always the product of what one has seen and what one has grown up with.
Done.
So one was working within the, I hate the word, but Bollywood tradition of things. So there was a lot of externalization of emotion. There was a lot of things that you embellished with, you put things out there.
Right.
Sort of our tradition of Bollywood comes a lot from Ram Leela,
Yeah.
where a lot of the performances are about reaching the last man in the audience.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of physical performance that exists. But what cinema does, which is not necessarily an Indian art form, it's a Western art form that has come to us, and now we love it. But what we've not been able to entirely get our hands on is that the camera can come right here. And the camera is a very strange, magical instrument.
Yeah.
It catches your life condition. So the actor's job in that case, unless you're doing a physical comedy, a comedy of errors of some kind where broad movements, etc., all of that dance type of thing is required, a choreography, then I think that what is really needed is to transmogrify yourself into those,
Right.
to alter your state of being, to alter your state of life. That is what the camera is wanting from you, and Anup taught me how to do that. He's outstanding. He's a Buddha. He's very zen, and he's very lovely and
Right.
very non-judgmental. And he passed that quality on to, I feel, both Irfan and me, and to Rasika and Tilotama, who were all also wonderful in the film.
Right.
So he passed that on to us as a sort of a legacy to carry on. So I think I transformed after that film.
Right, and after that you became, shall we say, friendlier with the camera?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. Friendlier, I would say more inner focused than outer focused.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then, of course, if there is an externalized, goofy performance like Murder Mubarak, then you'd pretty much do that.
One is trying to articulate something which is very difficult to articulate in an intelligible fashion.
Yeah.
Because these are sort of
Very intangible things.
intangible little things.
yeah.
But that inner truth and that inner quality which which exists can have many manifestations.
Right.
So in Murder Mubarak, you had to necessarily amp it up because that's the
Pitch of the
pitch of it. And Homie is the kind of person who's giving you that energy.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of taking the energy from the director,
Right.
because they've lived with it for a very long time. Most of them are writers of the piece of work, or
Right.
at least have spent 6 months, 1 year or more with that piece of work. Anup had spent 12 years with Kissa. So it was very easy to take from him. Homie is genuinely a very broad and loving human being, a mad eccentric human being.
Right.
So to take that eccentricity from him is how one can also alter one's performances, because otherwise I'll just be like sort of cookie cutter
Yeah.
and keep doing the same thing again and again. So I have what skill set I have and I try and work on it. But if you can collaborate with directors, then each performance will be sculpted differently, as in Kissa and Murder Mubarak.
Right. I think you explained that beautifully. So you didn't have to do the intangibles at all. So I'm going to go back to the time you entered films. Everybody has a struggle, a journey. There's nothing wrong with that. And we all, there are titles like Bali Umar Ko Salam. And what were you thinking when you went into that set? Did you just surrender? Or was there something inside you that was rebelling and said, this narrative is not my narrative. This is not what I think I want to do. Was there something happening there?
It was very uncomfortable for me, very square peg in round hole, very, very. I came into it with the wrong understanding, and that is my problem, not the problem of the business. The business is the business.
Yes.
When you come into anything, you yourself are a highly educated engineer and came into another profession, but you do understand an orientation. I came from a very different background. My family, writing books, a journalist, those would be the natural proclivity of someone like me. But coming into films, and that too from a very conservative background, I felt very violated by the kind of atmosphere that was around me, because there was a crassness in a way. The dance movements were in the way that it wasn't finessed, and I didn't land up with the right bunch of people at that point, I would say, because there was still Sanjay Leela Bhansali who was operating, there was a Vidhu Vinod Chopra who was working, but I didn't end up with them. I ended up with the more commercial, massy sort of thing,
right.
And that wasn't my thing at all.
Yeah.
I exited pretty quickly. I did about 3 or 4 films, and then I was like, which I signed in one spate, and then I was like, this ain't working for me. Fortunately for me, at the end of that tenure, I did an English film, Indo-British film, and the way they sort of looked at performance gave me hope, because that was almost entirely how I thought it ought to have been.
Right.
And then I said, oh my God, it is exactly like how I thought it was going to be. So let me do this sort of work more. So I went back to theatre, sort of took a break and rejigged myself. And then, fortunately for all of us, it all turned.
Yeah.
In the 2000s, everything sort of transformed, and you had the Dil Chahta Hai and the Lagan and all of that started coming through.
First, the multiplexes happened, then the OTTs happened, and then that pretty much became a good playing field for everybody, whether you want what you wanted to do. I also remember a movie in Tamil that you did with Sharat Kumar called I Love India.
Yeah.
Was that also one of the Inner Spate films that you signed?
To be honest, it was a little bit better, because there was still a great deal of respect, whatever the director thought, whatever his vision was. And I didn't entirely mind the film.
Right.
I mean, it was still very broad strokes, but within that, it was still quite interesting to work, and Sharat was lovely.
Right.
And the director was a bit eccentric, Pavitran.
Yeah.
But all in all, I enjoyed doing that film in a different language, to speak all of that. But yes, it was that whole batch of the heroine mold of things.
And this is a question I ask everybody who acts in another language, because each one has a different process because there's first you have to learn the words, then learn the emotions behind the words, know where to stop, where to do this, what was your thing?
So I'll tell you, I also did a film with Mamuka called Maya Bazaar.
Yeah.
And Malayalam is by far the most challenging language that I have encountered.
Really? That's closer to Hindi.
I found it incredibly difficult.
Okay.
Incredibly difficult. For me, Tamil is not difficult. I also, because I grew up quadrilingual, so we had Hindi, English, Punjabi, and Persian growing up in Afghanistan.
Right.
You develop, not by design but by sheer accident, an ear for language and for nuance in language. So if you catch, so for example, kadvale unnoda periya talavali. So the talavali is the, you know, the talavali is, you should, I'm sure I'm not getting it 100% right, but close enough, right? Which means, oh my God, you're a very big headache.
Yeah.
Which is not meant for you, but you know what I'm saying? So that sort of nuance, if you can get of the language, then I quite enjoy playing with language, because you know, you don't shoot it all together, you shoot it bits and pieces, and then you work with your language coaches and all of that. And of course, if there's big ass lines which are like, you know, pages upon pages, then you just mug it up and go with a broad emotion, because it's very difficult. But if they have certain nuance in smaller pieces, then you work on it.
Right. That's a lovely way to put it. You remember the whole thing, and then you play the broad emotion so that you don't get tied down with remembering which emphasis is on which line, kind of a thing, because it's too much.
Too much, and also those chunks are normally tirades. You know, they're like, what the hell are you doing? So that you can carry that off in one broad emotion.
Yeah, that's nice. It's like a, but at what point in your career did you decide to take hold of the situation and say, now I need to create my own narrative, I need to make stories for myself? Because you've directed a movie, and also we have to reference Khushwant Singh because name dropping is always good. But, you know, because right about the time Tare Zameen Par happened, that pretty much put you on the map.
Yeah.
After that, though, there was still a time when there seemed to be a bit of
A lull?
not really a lull, but you were doing things like for example, what made you say, I want to do a TV show which is all about criminals and what their journey is? I forget the name of the show. Gunahon ka something. Prayashchit. It had this fantastically B-movie subtitle, Gunahon ka something.
Something.
Yeah, Prayashchit.
Prayashchit, yeah. So two things. One also does the work that one gets.
Right.
Because I am okay to do television because it pays the bills.
Yeah.
And within what was being offered to me, I didn't want to do fiction. But non-fiction and getting into the minds of criminals and criminality and how they're reforming was a very interesting thing that I ended up doing. It was extremely difficult to shoot, by the way, because we were shooting in live locations, and it was very difficult to concentrate, because as actors you're given quiet sets to be able to say your lines. So it's very incredibly difficult. But it was also a way to continue to work, because I've continued to work despite everything, even if I was not able to get the kind of work I really wanted to do, or it was few and far between. So then one fills it up with stuff which is, you know, interesting enough.
No, I've heard an actor say that there's no such thing as bad work because everything adds a new tool to your kit. So
True that.
yeah.
True that.
Yeah.
True that. Though I would say there are some things which are bad work, which is just cringe.
But anyway, at what point did you say, I need to start creating stuff for myself? I need to own my narrative.
In 2016, there was a particular director who sort of strung me along for a bit of time and said that, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. And we started doing prep, and we started doing costumes, and we started doing lines and everything. And about 4 days before shoot, he said that, you know, we're going with someone younger.
No.
And I was like, okay. And he tried to fob it off by saying, you know, it's the call of the producers and blah, blah, blah. But I could see that it was just, I didn't want to hear that anymore. Also, by this time, I was getting a sense of the fact that there are things that are going on in my head which I've been ignoring for some time. I've had the benefit of working with wonderful directors and learning and watching them and seeing their process and imbibing that. So I made up my mind at that point. I said, you know what, if youth and beauty are the only two things that are attractive in a particular market, let me see if my insides rebelled against that. They said, you know, people are interested in people. If they're only interested in young and beautiful, that's a very sad world we're living in. So I had been doing this piece as a platform theatre at Prithvi called Chutney, which was a Bhisham Sahani's story. So it had sort of again morphed into something else by that time in my head. So I narrated that to a few very close people, and we came up with the story and we wrote it. And the protagonist was neither good looking nor young, nor did she have any other privilege. She was not well spoken. She didn't have a male heir or a child to give her that entitlement कि माँ है एक लड़के की or anything. Subpar as per what society deems as being powerful.
Right.
And yet she controls the narrative in that story, and you end up both awestruck and amazed by the character of Vanita. And the views that that film gave us, that was the first thing I ever wrote, just solidly reaffirmed to me that what you're thinking is also not wrong. I would not say that the others are wrong. They're doing what they're doing. But this is some truth that I have to put out into the world.
Right.
So that's how that happened.
That's how that began.
Yeah.
And what about the film that you've directed?
The film that I've directed, we are going with a working title of Train from Chaprola, is a sort of, if you must,
Is that an homage to your great uncle? Because Khushwant Singh's most famous novel is Train to Pakistan.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
It was a sort of a faint echo, because you can't really let go of things that are around you and in you. But it's a very different sort of a story. That was a partition story.
No,
Yeah.
not the story. But the
But the
when
title,
you said Train, I was like, oh my God, this is like...
Yeah, there is a small whiff of that, but it's still a working title.
Yeah.
We have to still lock on this. I hope that we can, because I like it. It's quirky and it's got its own sort of charm, and it has a deep resonance to the script and some things that are happening in the film. So yeah, now I'm directing. I've finished our first edit. So yeah.
What does it feel like?
It feels like a lot, because as an actor, you are done with your shot and then you're done. And then you go to the vanity and you do whatever you're doing. But as a director, it's like you have to be hydra-headed.
Yeah, you have to do everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And you get asked the most absurd questions. And at some point you just have to say, I don't know, figure it out. I really don't know. Like, an actor came to me and said, so should I be shaving my chest for this or should I not? Another one came to me and said, what do you want the font to be on the number plate of this car? Another one is saying, do you want the weather vane facing left or right? I'm like, so there's absurd questions that come. So, yeah.
Yeah, but what was directing like? For you, you spent all these years as an actor and then you take the plunge into directing. What was your first day on set like?
I enjoyed it very much. From the get-go, my entire focus was on performances.
Yeah.
Entirely. That was what
And you have Radhika Apte.
we have Radhika Apte, we have Divyendu, we have a wonderful cast.
Right.
I'm honestly delighted, beyond delighted with what we've been able to collaborate and bring out with the actors. I think that is going to be the high point of the film. The script is very strong. It's very good. We're quite happy with that as well. So performances, script, and visuals. Of course, we have Manish Malhotra, who's the master of visuals. So it's a marriage between that sort of.
Manish Malhotra is producing this.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you were in control from day one.
I would say
apart from the chest shaving and the other things. Yeah. So.
Yes, I would imagine so. And not from, I didn't look at it as a position of control really, but I sort of knew what I wanted.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I sort of knew what I wanted because I've also been a part of writing it. So, the sense of it was very strong for me that this is the mudda, this is the beating heart of this scene and this is where this needs to go. So that part was amply clear to me. And almost irritatingly so, because I went after what I wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
Why irritatingly so?
Because sometimes people want to be a little bit more free-flowing and then you're insisting on what you want and you're like, okay, you do it your way, but also give me one for my way.
Right.
And sometimes people come with their own imagination of what they've read in the script. The beauty of reading something that's written on paper is that the way it mirrors on the insides of your eyelids is completely different for each person.
Yeah.
So how I saw it, I had to bring them to that. And a few days into it, and then we were all on the same page.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice, nice.
yeah.
But actually, that in a way you could say that of a certain kind of cinema as well, not the broad strokes mainstream cinema, but the other kind, where things are not always said, like Kissa, for instance.
Yeah.
Like 100 different people could see the film and take away lots of different things depending on how think, because it is, of course, the broad narrative of this is what is happening is there, but there are so much that's unspoken, unsaid, that inside of the eyelids works that way as well, I think. Yeah.
It absolutely does. And I think that's the kind of film that I myself am hugely invested in.
Right.
And Chutney did give us those wings, because when you see the short, there is, if you read the comments on YouTube, it is the most watched short film in the world. So if you read the comments, you'll see everyone's dived into those spaces which
Yeah.
we have deliberately
Good.
left
Yeah.
to interpret it. And now it's not my film, it's your film.
Yeah.
Because now you have co-written it with me, because
Yeah.
in your mind's eye, you've seen it in your way.
Right.
So that's now yours.
Yeah.
And then they will never forget it.
Yeah.
Then it's theirs.
Because they own it.
They own it.
Yeah.
It's theirs.
One of the most beautiful things about YouTube, there's something that I've found that if you do something with this, maybe too cliche a word, but let's say honesty, there's almost always somebody that picks up on it. And they really go into raptures over it in the comment, like, and that's sometimes, you're just happy that there are these people out there that it struck a chord with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I made it a monologue, a tirade or whatever it is, but it's just.
No, but
yeah.
that is absolutely,
Yeah.
you couldn't have phrased it better. That is absolutely the truth. The minute, for example, if there is a fight between two people on the road, suddenly everybody will drop whatever it is that they're doing and they'll start watching that.
Yeah.
There is a slight sense of a heightened emotion felt really. Cinema is not about just watching people doing, it is heightened reality.
Yeah.
So when you watch that heightened reality, but you're able to maintain the truth, the honesty in that heightened reality, in that tale, it has to be worth telling. So when you maintain that, even if you notch it as high as, say, a Leonardo DiCaprio does, his performances are almost always notched really high. And yet there is an Irfan who plays it sort of low. So, you have between all of that, if the truth exists, it will be heard loud and clear.
Yeah. With Irfan, one of the things I've really enjoyed is, and of course I miss, is it would always be interesting to see where his pauses come in his line readings. You think that's where it's going to happen, and then it wouldn't. He had that way of making every
Breaking
line,
rhythm.
owning it, and then it's almost like he was saying it for the very first time. And I think that's something that really made him very special. So
Yeah.
you've trained under Nasiruddin Shah, you worked with people like Irfan Khan, and you said you were not a trained actor. So tell me maybe one or two things that you've picked up that could be useful to people who want to become actors.
Well, Nasir sir is one rare individual. He will tell it like it is to you as your teacher. He doesn't give a rat's ass about where you are, who you are, what you're doing. He's like, you're guiding the emotion. You're doing this, you're doing that. And he had this workshop just before I got Tare Zameen Par. He told me that we were doing this workshop and I was trying to ask these questions. I said, sir, so what happens when you first get a script? He just walked away puffing his cigarette and said, learn the lines and don't walk into the furniture. So
that's a Spencer Tracy line.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Latin goes, learn your lines and don't bump into the furniture.
Yeah,
Yes,
so that's what
yeah.
Sir paraphrased. And I just kind of said, yeah, okay, actually that's where it starts. And then anything else is upwards from there. Marinating with the script, marinating with the text, just having the time to sit with that text. Even on Murder Mubarak, for example, I spent a lot of time with that text, with that character. I sort of went into her. It wasn't the need of what was asked of me. Nobody said to do those things. But I sort of wanted to feel this person who's living this fake life in Delhi, and actually she's from a very small town in Punjab, and she detests more than anything the smell of cow dung and her father drinking and that kind of thing. I don't know if it translates, but for me, it just made it so much richer for me to experience that. Not everything will be seen, but somewhere I believe those invisible smells and images that you work with will be seen by the audience. They will see it in some way.
Right.
Not in the way that you see it perhaps, but in their own way.
Right.
But you have to have it.
In one of your interviews, you mentioned that one of the Indian actors that you admired totally was Sri Devi. And you said you just loved the energy that she brought to every scene. Now, what is it that you really liked about her?
A full fangirl.
Right.
I think in the last few years of school when Chandni and all of that came out, again, her belief, you could manifest it in whichever shape or form. And the further from reality that the spectrum that she operates in, Hawa Hawai, whether it's Chandni, whatever it is, it's so far from reality. But to maintain that belief, the integrity of your belief in that moment, flawless. She's flawless. Sadma, she could do chalbaz, she could do everything. So I think perhaps the finest actor, and again within mainstream, she gave dignity to mainstream. She elevated it by bringing her craft
Right.
to that kind of thing, because she brought reality within those unreal shimmering sequins, curly head wigs. She made it all seem real by her the manner in which she manifested reality into those. That's the dream.
Right.
You know, to be able to do a kissa or a murder Mubarak or a this or a that, we're still not going to 100. She went to 1,000.
Yeah.
You know, so the range of to be able to pull reality, to amp it so much, means that you're anchored very securely within the reality.
Right.
That's what I feel about her. And the sense of humor that she brought to her parts, that uncanny timing that she had, comic timing, forever in awe.
You articulated this beautifully. At what point did this, like when you saw her in your school days or maybe college days, were you looking at it from, I'm just enjoying this performance kind of thing, or were you actually dissecting it a little?
Subconsciously, maybe. But at that point, being an actor in films wasn't even on the horizon.
Right.
I mean, it was a guilty little dream somewhere burgeoning in my head, but it wasn't really like a thing. So, and the family that I came from, it was like, what? Are you mad? What the hell are you talking? So, no. But when I saw that, I was like, whoa. I was thoroughly entertained.
Right.
At the end of the day, whatever you do, you have to entertain.
Right.
The reality is also to entertain. Because if you can't connect, then that's not entertaining.
Yeah.
And nobody gives a shit then.
Would you use the word entertaining or engaging? Because entertaining is a little, for me, it's a little more like
Plebeian?
giving you a good time.
Huh.
Whereas engaging is like a chutney is engaging. You know, like it's not necessarily entertaining. Do you agree with that, or?
I think it's entertaining only because it's levels of entertainment.
Right, okay.
It's a tickle. It's a tickle for your brain. It's a tickle for your baser senses. It could be a tickle of any kind.
Right.
It's a humor. It's whatever, the ludicrous, whatever it is. But you're tickling something. You're touching and prodding something inside.
Right.
Sometimes it's the basic humanity of someone.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's you make them see human beings in a brand new way, which like Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
The writing of that did that for me. I said, I never saw it this way.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that removing that layer for you, whichever manner.
Yeah. So you would say Anatomy of a Fall is an entertaining movie as well.
Of course it is.
Right. Right.
Of course it is.
Okay,
because
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. What part of you it titillates or tickles or prods into thought.
Right.
It's all entertainment for me.
Right. So what is it like being a storyteller at a time when so many avenues for storytelling have opened up.
Golden.
Okay.
We're in a golden time.
Okay.
I feel. And the realization of this dawned upon me a few weeks after Chutney came out, because we were at some 70,
It's
80,
insane, yeah.
something million. And we were like, what even just happened here? Everyone was like, their jaws had dropped at the numbers and
Yeah.
at the reactions and everything. So it liberates you, because, you feel that for every type of storyteller, there is an audience for every type. And so you are no longer at the whims and fancies of anyone. You can make your type of content and somebody will be loving it somewhere. And it's just that you have to find where they are. The other thing which I want to add here, Bharadwaj, is that if you look at international content, whether you see someone like a Sandra Bullock, or you see a Brad Pitt, or you see Leonardo DiCaprio, if you look at the titles, you'll see executive producer Brad Pitt, executive producer, so and so on and so forth. Today, if you've been in the business for a while, then you have to become, in some shape or form, part of the ecosystem.
A stakeholder.
You have to become a stakeholder. You have to back that content. You have to say, this is the kind of story that needs to be made, and I'm here to become an enabler of it.
Right.
And that could be directing, that could be producing, that could be writing, that could be getting a bunch of people together who you think will service that story best. So that, I think, is how it's going to be, at least for me, and I feel for a lot of people who believe in a certain kind of story, in a certain kind of work. You can't wait and say कि मेरे को काम आएगा. नहीं भी आएगा तो बनाओ. And this time is golden for that reason, that you can now do your own shit in your own way.
Right, right. This other thing that you've been doing in terms of writing, which is, you've written 2 books, which is not, we've not been prolific with books, but they're interesting books. The first one's about acting, entering the experiences of what you can expect when, it was called Acting Smart?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the first one, and then you had a book for preteens.
Yes. What's Up With Me?
What's Up With Me? They're about a decade apart. What just spurred this outpouring?
So What's Up With Me is a lockdown baby. We were all sitting around twiddling our thumbs, and I was seeing my daughter growing up, and I know how smart this generation is. So I wanted to be able to, and they like it on the nose. They like it, you shoot from the hip. They don't like you talking in metaphors and, you know, telling them misinformation.
You don't need to show them the birds and the bees.
No,
and,
They're going to laugh at you. They're going to be, yeah, what are you telling me? So I wanted to help her and her friends and people of that age group understand we don't talk about the 2 extremely crucial parts of a woman's growing up. One is the starting of menstruation and the other is the ending of it. These 2 periods need a lot more attention because it's a very confusing time, both times. When it starts and when it ends are both very confusing. So for my daughter, I wanted to write a book that echoes the sentiments of that generation, written very simply, but in words and giving information. So I have a doctor, a gynac, Dr. Mahala Arora. I have Malvika Verma, who's a therapist. So we got together and wrote this book, and we had illustrations and all of that, so that girls understand there's nothing abnormal, and we wanted to bring this conversation mainstream. So that fathers can tell their daughters, want anything, and she can say, just on your way back, just get pads. Stuff like that.
And Acting Smart?
Acting Smart is basically from all my mistakes, because it's not a book about acting, it's about the business of acting. So you take acting out, and it's everything else. So it's the managers, it's the image, it's the integrity, it's what you carry on shoot, it's, you know, everything. So I wanted to be able to share all of that, and I think a lot of actors have read it, so I really enjoyed talking to them and you know, putting that information out there.
Right. It reminded me of, not exactly, but it reminded me vaguely of Luck by Chance.
Interesting.
But you see where that connection comes from, right? It's just like, because I think maybe they were a few years apart, not very far apart, and I had, I forget which one came first, but I'm
sure Luck by Chance came first.
So that was like a very interesting inside persons, because Lakpa Chant, I'm very sure could have been made only by an insider. You know, like
Absolutely.
only somebody who knows the industry like Zoya does
Yeah.
could have made that.
Yeah.
And you know, like, but are there specific people like I like this director, I'm going to go and ask them if they have something for me? Have you done that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've been busy the whole of last year directing the film, and it's taken the whole year. But now I have so many people on my list. I have Rajamouli sir, that I don't have his number, but if you have it, I'll take it from you, and I will call him and tell him that I love his work. Again, the degree of belief that he brings to these situations and the conviction that I'd love to be a part of something on that scale.
Yeah.
So if you have Rajamouli sir's number, then I'd love to call him and tell him that I'd love to work with him. Purely because of the level of conviction that he brings to that kind of scale.
Right.
If there is Avinash Arun, I'd love to work with. I mean, there's so many people. Sanjay Leela Bhansali, I'd love to work with. I'd like to work with young, new, different people. You know, Zoya, I'd love to work with. There's so many people that one would really like to collaborate with.
Right, right. I told you we'd come back to Khushwant Singh. We're going to end the interview, but I need a, like, I'm a fanboy. And you know, because...
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
I don't know, because, you know, I grew up at an era when there was still the Illustrated Weekly of India. And
With malice towards one and all.
Yeah, so it's like, oh my God, this is like, you know, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. But what was it like, you know, just being, were you around him at all, or was he some distant person in a distant land, or what was it like?
He was pretty much distant in a distant land, but of course there was rumors and conversation, and you know, he was always there.
But you knew he was famous?
Of course.
Yeah. No, because sometimes when you're inside, you kind of don't realize the impact that somebody has.
I didn't realize the impact.
Yeah.
That I didn't. I was too young and I didn't even care. That impact was not impactful for me.
Yeah.
But as one grew up and started reading some of the stuff, old hand-me-downs and stuff like that, magazines that were sort of preserved, articles that were cut out, and you know, those things also used to happen. Yeah. When I got married, I took my husband to meet him, who's also a prolific writer, Sanjay, and we walked into his house at Sujan Singh Park this was 4 in the evening, and that was his time to start his little drink. And he was, I think, 91, 92 at that point, and there were these stalactites and stalagmites of books, and we were winding our way through, and there was his single malt, which is so almost comic. He poured himself a drink, and then he didn't want to share the single malt with Sanjay, so he said, "You have that one." So he gave him the non-single malt, and he poured himself the single malt. And so Sanjay asked him that, "Have you read all of these books, these pillars of books?" So he said, "100 saal ka saman aur kal ki khabar nahi." And he was most gossipy about the film business. He wanted to know everything from me. He was like, obviously you should be an actor. And, you know, he was telling Sanjay that stop everything else, stop all this plane flying and write. You write so well, I've read your book. And he'd written a couple of books by that time.
Your husband's still a pilot, right?
He is
He's
a pilot,
captain in the Air India.
With Air India, yes. So he was, I think the thing that struck me the most is that you don't have to be anything other than yourself. You're quite enough. You're quite unbelievable as you are.
Yeah.
And that authenticity is something that was such a part of his DNA, that he was entirely who he was.
Yeah.
He didn't give a small fish's tit.
Yeah. I'm glad you spoke this way, because first of all, I'm just imagining this, and it's like this can be a scene in a movie that you write, you know, this stalactites and stalagmites of books. I mean, it's so visual. But beyond that, it goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier, that, you know, because there were those who thought he was blasphemous and dirty old man and, you know, this and that, but there were also those who, like Train to Pakistan, it's like, it's such a definitive, along with Manto's books, it's such a definitive, you know,
cultural moment.
It's a thing, you know. So first reading him and then learning about him was probably my first exposure to learning that somebody can be multitudes, you know, like you don't have to be one person or one single thing. You can have all these things jostling within you. And yeah, I'm sorry I deviated from films, but I just needed this nostalgia moment, you know. It was
No,
like,
absolutely. For me as well, because to read Delhi and then Train to Pakistan and all of his other writing, there is a certain quality of flowiness which I find rare. It washes over you.
Yeah.
It's an experience.
it's very
Yeah,
goes to your heart.
just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, it's almost as if you forget that there is a word and a sentence and a comma and a full stop. You forget about all of that. It just becomes, like, washes over you entirely.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that quality of his writing. And the other thing that I almost entirely admire about him is that he was a marketing genius. The blasphemy, the speaking completely freely and saying exactly what he wanted was, of course, a sort of stream of consciousness, Salinger thing before Salinger, or whatever you want to call it, was his thing. But it was also a canny mind that knew that this is what is going to, people are going to be like, but also because we were talking about the very kosher 70s, 80s, where everything was very chi-chi, ha-ha,
Yeah,
ho-ho
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
So he understood that. And it isn't like he was short of words
Yeah.
to express it in a less profane manner.
Yeah. And I hope that his writing genes have percolated into you, because I can't wait to see.
Please
Of course,
don't
the short
say
films I've
that.
seen.
Don't
Why?
say that.
That's a good thing.
I know, but it's like I can't.
You should. It's like if you could do a chutney, then, and I think you know, the expectations are going to be high. You've also, see, very frankly, when I see the name Tisca Chopra in a movie, and I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me, I think, okay, this is going to be worth seeing. Whether ultimately it turns out different is a different thing, but it's a promise of, okay, she's there, so it's probably something that she saw in this that made her commit to this. Let's watch it. So
Thank
that's
you.
a good place to be.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. And
and-
coming from you, it is very, very humbling, and I hope to be able to continue to maintain that authenticity, because it has certainly affected my bank. I've made far less money than I could have had I said yes to everything that came my way. But they have been difficult choices.
Can you say something that you said no to? Can you mention something that you say no to?
So after Tare Zameen Par, the idea of the suffering mom and
Oh, yeah.
a lot of that came my way. A huge lot from all the big production houses, every single one. And then I was like, but that's like a singer singing the same rag for the rest of their life. I don't want to do that.
But what gave you the security to say that? Because that was fairly early.
Yes.
So I mean, of course, post your that initial phase, but when you were trying to re-establish yourself, so one would have thought, there was no insecurity at all that you were letting go these parts? Was there no like, will if I say no to everything, will they start thinking I'm just saying no and no one will come to me?
I'm thinking that now. I didn't think that then. I didn't think that then. I think that I was always fairly choosy. Always fairly certain that, because I put a lot of myself into things.
Yeah.
A lot. Like, I will wrap myself around the director, and I don't mean that as a vulgarianism.
It's not a Kushwant Singh joke.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I will actually go into the insides of his mind and start sucking on the little capillaries and find out those little thought bubbles that he's had when he was writing it. Blah, 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 blah. I want that. That's what gives me joy.
Yeah.
I think God is in the detail.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
I think that the broad strokes of things, it's good enough, all of that it bothers me. I can't sleep at night.
Right.
If I haven't really done my very best in that moment. So for me, those are precious things. So if you're putting that much of yourself and you feel that the other person's operating on another level, then perhaps we're not a good match for each other. I'll become troublesome to them and they'll become troublesome to me. So better not walk that path. Unless it's a joyful movie like Good News or a Jug Jug Jio, which is operating on another fully
Yeah.
joyful
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
So then you're working on that, which is also very
Very
welcome.
yeah.
I'm very happy to do that as well. But if you're talking about something that gets into your innards, then you do need to find people who have the same way of thinking.
Wavelength. And, yeah. We started out with this and now we're going to end with this. I really want you to explain what Anup meant when he said he wanted you to act thinking of wind in trees. Because that's been playing on my mind. I'm like, I need to know what this is.
And mine. For the longest time, I was in the middle of a shoot, 4 or 5 days into a film, new director, working on this film, and it's an international film. It's 5-country co-production, and the director's telling you wind in trees, and you're like, what do you want? Tell me what you want. So I think he speaks in metaphors.
Right.
So he wants you to interpret that as in how a gust of wind would be in a tree, to feel that inner ripple, to feel that excitement, to feel that sort of, feeling. I'm sure he's going to be vastly amused looking at this interview. He's going to die laughing, and that I'm.
He's going to say, "That's not what I meant at all."
That's possible. That's possible.
But thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you, Tisca.
Likewise.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bharath Institute of Higher Education and Research, Chennai. Admissions open for BTech, BSc Agri, BPharm, Nursing, Paramedical and Arts and Science courses.